Oi, you there! What species are you? He said from his throne. Earthling? I replied, not knowing if it was the right thing to say. 3 hours earlier. I was at my writing table working on a short story about human duplication when I started to feel a bit queasy. A tired feeling swept over me, along with a fuzzy feeling. It was the feeling you get when you are just about to pass out. My head felt super heavy, and a migraine emerged. After this process of nausea and aching all over my body, I got my wits about me and woke up realizing that I was not in my room anymore. I do not think I was even on Earth anymore. I was being guided into a spaceship-type vessel with 2 guards at my sides. The spaceship may be more accurately described as a mini-planet. I gazed up through the glass ceiling and saw it. I saw Earth. I was in outer space. I was on a mini-planet with tunnels internally and externally. I was orbiting around Earth. I smiled a wimpy smile and tried to walk faster, but then I felt a set of handcuffs around my wrists. I had 2 arms, which were very strong, pulling me up by the armpits. They were the arms you would see at a bodybuilding contest. I would have to say, though, it was a very nice, sleek, and shiny hallway, walking through long corridor after long corridor, with what I assumed to be alien guards. I got to see the several different types of metal ceilings, and could smell the faint smell of birch trees. The guards and I arrived to what I guessed to be the center of their mini-planet-like ship. It was a circular room with extreme parallelism. Everything was equal. If there was a guard in one spot of the room, there would be another guard of equal height, equidistant from the center of the room on the other side. In the center was an altar of sorts. It was a whitish, clear, almost translucent structure. I later found out that it was metal, a metal I have never seen or heard of before. The guards let go of me and proceeded to take off the handcuffs off my wrists. I walked around the room a bit and saw the 8 huge metal spheres on the outskirts of the room. They were impossibly shiny, shinier than what I ever thought possible. When I usually look at a metallic ball, there are parts that are always out of focus. Strangely enough, every single reflection was in focus on all of these spheres. After I had wandered around seeing the spheres that were about 3 times my height, and the altar which felt like chrome, I found myself being approached by 2 guards. They were different this time. They had purple spiky armor that glowed. The closer they got to me, the brighter the armor glowed. I willingly let them handcuff me. At this point, I knew I had no chance of escape. Plus, I was actually starting to find this all rather interesting. Again, I was led down one of the corridors, through a tunnel to the left. The cylindrical metal walls seemed to shine brighter than the previous walls, as if they were giving off their own ambient light. I determined that the glowing armor wasn't from them getting closer to me, but rather the altar. I think it's a source of their power, maybe radiation, for their mini-planet. We reached the end of the passageway, revealing a very purple room. I mean, everything was extremely purple. The walls, the chairs, and even the guards' faces were painted purple. This room smelled nice, like tree sap. It was not all a bad smell, but it was strong enough for me to cough a little.
I guess this is the main hub room, right?
I said after a few seconds of silence. We were in the room for a few minutes before anyone did or said anything. The silence gave me a chance to get a good look at the main figure of the room. There was a throne containing a large intimidating alien with purple grass growing out of his 3 chins. His chins were very purple, of course, as were the... As I looked down, I noticed that my entire body was a glossy purple. I looked back up, but I suddenly realized I was back in my house. I was back at my writing desk, gazing out of the window. I froze for a couple seconds, not knowing quite sure what exactly had just happened. I took a few deep breaths and blinked a few times, making sure I was awake. But then I felt the fuzziness start up again. I felt sick, and I think I actually passed out this time. When I awoke this time, I was in the same tunnel as before, being guided by the same two strong guards with the spiky red armor. When we arrived in the circular room with the shiny spheres, I was left alone again and had the handcuffs taken off. I sat down this time and leaned up against one of the spheres. The two new different guards came up and led me down the passages to the left, which eventually led to the purple room. Looking down to see my socks as they turned purple as I walked into the purple room, I found that I was having a little bit more fun this time around. A smile arose upon my face.
Hello again.
I said, a bit cheery. I then began to realize I wasn't going to be there very long.
Please, not again.
I said, but it was too late. The fuzziness came back, and I was back at my writing table. I eventually got accustomed to the teleportation sickness after about the 30th time this routine went on. The routine went on a total of 57 times. On my 57th time, I was a little fed up. I determined that being sent back had nothing to do with me having to greet the throned individual in a certain way. I tried everything, bowing, different languages. I even tried to get free from the guards a few times. I was almost successful on trip number 43, but I gave up and they teleported me back home. I don't think they're going to stop the routine until I say what they want me to say. On the 57th time through this seemingly endless loop, I did not say anything. I just looked intently at the alien in the throne and waited for him to speak first. One of the guards to his right was talking to him in a very throaty language. He looked at me every few sentences. A few minutes of sideways looks from the other guards, and what I thought was a throaty laugh went on behind me. The throned alien turned back to look at me. I figured I was not supposed to say anything, so I didn't. He started to speak in his throaty language. I almost half expected him to cough up phlegm at one point, but he didn't. He just paused and started up again. After he had figured out I had no idea what he was saying, he stopped talking. He turned back to his guard on his right, which gave me a few minutes to look more around the room. This was the longest time I had been in the purple room. Everything was still a glossy purple. I looked at the guard and he looked back at me. I quickly shuddered as I saw his 3 eyes were shiny purple. I tried my best to back away, but both guards kept me still. Their arms must have been the size of small tree trunks. I decided to ignore their creepy eyes and focus on what I assumed to be their leader. The throned alien turned his head to look at me. "Do you understand me this time?" he said. I was a little confused at his very strong Scottish accent.
Yes, I do, but...
"Oi, you there! What species are you? Never interrupt when I am talking." That's why I was sent back. He doesn't want me to speak. Every time I went through the routine of being teleported and being brought back to the purple room, I tried to say something when all I had to do was shut up.
Earthling,
I replied, not knowing if that was the right terminology. "Quanta mais, sir?" the big alien said.
Wait, no, don't teleport me again. I've thrown up enough times today. I really don't want to. Wait, why are you...
I stopped, a bit startled. They were all staring at me.
You're understanding what I'm saying now, aren't you?
I looked around the room to see 27 eyes all peering at me. I guess this was the first alien speech they had ever heard and paid attention to. "We induced an overlapping repeated time vortex resulting in non-existent quantum entanglement of your embodiment," he said. This time I was thankful for the American accent. I laughed. having no idea what he had just said.
I'm sorry. I know you are speaking in my language, but I do not understand what you are saying. That makes sense.
We have put you in a time loop. As for the repeated teleporting, we had no way of knowing that you had ways of knowing our language. You are the first species that does not change your vernacular when you are teleported. I am sorry on my behalf. The throned alien promptly stood up from his chair and bowed.
Are you studying the human race?
I said, after he had sat down. You are the protected, my dear. He said. I saw a slight grin appear on his face.
But who are you?
We are the protectors from Brigskapar. One of the guards was speaking now. Planet Earth is a Class 5 indigenous planet with no means of protection from invasive species.
You are protecting humans.
I stated, and received no response.
You are protecting Earth.
I stated, and received a confirming nod from the alien.
Why are you telling me this?
I questioned, wondering why I, of all people, was chosen to be told this knowledge. The throned alien answered me this time. You are a writer. You carry the art of description, and you are not scared. He was looking at me with a joyful face, a face full of hope and gratitude. I stepped back. The guards let me do so. I looked around the room. I saw the purple ceiling, the glorious throne, and the 8 guards. I looked back at the guard to my right, and he looked back. I realized, this time, I was not freaked out by his eyes anymore. They were fascinating. They were purple. The headache came first this time, then the fuzziness followed. The last thing I remember was closing my eyes. When I awoke the next day, I was at my writing table. I looked at the short story I was writing. It was a bit fuzzy to me, and I realized it would be very confusing if anyone else had read it. I moved it aside. I sharpened a new pencil and reached for some fresh blank paper. This is going to be good, I assured myself. This is going to be good. Oi, you there! What species are you? I wrote, smiling, and I gazed out the window.